Hello, and welcome to Fireside Chat number 3 in our Power and Influence series of Fireside Chats. I want to take a few minutes to say something about the second introductory conceptual framework that I mentioned last time in the 3 I's video. It's called the one-many problem. And again, like the 3 I's, this is not a theory per se in the sense of explaining something in specific, but it, to me, identifies a pattern of reality, a pattern of circumstances and problems and situations that within which our specific questions and answers can be considered. And let me just explain it to you, and I hope that you'll see by way of some example what I mean. The one-many problem is a situation that's been identified as early as the ancient Greek philosophers. And basically, it's that the many individuals of us have to live together in one community. And that means that the many individuals who have different sets of goals and desires and values, in some measure, are subordinated, have to subordinate those goals, interests, desires, values to the requirements of living together in one community with one set of rules and one set of assumptions and expectations and values that follow therefrom. And there's a tension between these things because almost none of us gets the one structure, the community collective structure, to match precisely what our preferences and values are. And the most of us have to subordinate some to a lot of our own desires, needs, preferences, goals, and values to the requirement of living in a community. So the tensions present, and then what politics and political science is interesting about, or what's interesting about political science and politics, is that's really then an explanation and analysis of the different ways or mechanisms by which we strike the one-many balance or try to resolve the tension as much as possible. So, democratic procedure, voting for those who have authority over the structures that create the one environment for the many of us, is one instrument and one mechanism by which we can do that balancing, that one-many balancing. A dictatorship is obviously another, and creates a different set of one-many balances and outcomes and values and elevates the desires and preferences and needs of a different subset of the population. The easiest example in front of us perhaps today in the United States is questions of gay marriage, in the sense that there's a set of values and preferences and desires that one group, a more traditional group, has about what marriage is, and thinks that we all ought to have that. And then a group of different, or newer group on the scene has a different set of values, preferences, and goals regarding what marriage is, and they want that to be the order of social and political life for the many, all of us, the many of us. The rub, of course, is that the one decision, the decisions regarding how the one community will live together under what rules, according to what parameters, applies to everyone, unless it is a dictatorship of a few. But in a democratic society, anyway, this applies to all of us, whether you like it or not. And of course, that means that there's some amount of requirement that the many of us submit or be co-opted or coerced. And it's the latter which is interesting to me, because living together in a community of two or larger involves some amount of coercion. Well, at least in the governmental structure. I'm thinking I said two, I don't want to talk about marriage. But to live in a governed community requires some amount of coercion. I tend to like living in a representative society because I think it takes less coercion than living in North Korea. Having just read how they executed the defense minister by putting him in front of an anti-aircraft gun. So sorry for that diversion, but the quality and intensity of coercion is different in the different kinds of political structures. So there's lots of analytical fruit to be harvested there in something like that. There's lots of analytical gain to be had as well, thinking about international politics and questions of power and influence. When you think about the ways that we try to set up international bodies and what they can or can't do and how they do them. A body like the UN, which has to operate on so much consensus to get the many members to commit to the one view and the one program, hamstrings that in great degree. But to release the UN from consensus requirements means that some will have greater authority than others, and that would alienate those members, and they might opt out. Sorry, my lights went out. They might opt out of the organization, which then hamstrings it in a different kind of way. We talk about interacting with, regarding power and influence of countries vis-a-vis other countries or other non-state actors. What kinds of constraints those different sets of, if a democratic procedure country with one particular kind of resolution of the one many problem interacts with a dictatorial society that has a different kind of resolution of the one many problem, you have different sets of opportunities and constraints in place. Think about Henry Kissinger famously said when he was negotiating with the Soviets on arms control. He said, look, you guys, the Russians across the Soviets across the table from him, you guys can decide, and right now you can decide this thing. I have to go back to a Senate in my country and have them approve this agreement, and I am more constrained by that than you are. So he tried to play the democratic procedure against his adversary in some measure. I don't want to talk about whether that was successful or not, or whether that was a good idea. My point is understanding the different political structures, and in some senses, at the very bottom, the way that they solve their one-many problem gives you some insight into a diplomatic procedure, like negotiating arms. So I wanted to raise this because I think there's some fascinating questions about that one could come up with looking through the lens of the one-many problem. I've posted a paper of mine, a presentation I did actually at Fort Lewis several years ago, on the question of whether the one-many problem gives us some insight into the difficulty of transitioning a clan-based dictatorship, like Iraq was, to a multinationally diverse democratic regime is going to be, helps us understand, thinking about one-many, helps us understand that there's going to be some problems with doing that. And I think looking at those problems by way of the one-many, through the one-many lens, might be helpful to understand what some of the difficulties and constraints and where the opportunities and the barriers might lie. So the paper is it's a very short and somewhat abstracted, and I probably, when we get to that time in the term, I'll probably do another video laying out some of the paper discussion a little bit more thoroughly, the paper that I've posted, in other words. But I wanted to give you a sense of this now, that it might be a framework that's interesting, and I can't even imagine the ways one might be able to apply this to other issues. And I'm not saying all issues can be illuminated by way of the three I's or the one-many problem, but it does give some interesting leverage on a topic or an issue or a circumstance that you see out there that might help you find interesting puzzles to deal with. I will mention these as we go. Other videos, we talk about other topics in the course. I might come back to this as I see it fruitful to do so. But I want to make sure I gave you some exposure to that. So we've got the three I's: ideas, institutions, and individuals as the mechanisms that the categorical places where we think about what drives history forward, and now I'm offering you the one many as a sort of social and political tension that exists in a society or community about resolving the difference between all the many of us have different sets of values and preferences and goals, but we have to live together under one set of rules. And this is true. I'm sitting in a school of 750 sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, and of course we have the problem in the school. We have the problem in the particular community where we live. The military has that problem in a different way. My state has the problem. Washington State has the problem in a different way. We as the United States have a problem in a different way, and so on, so on, so on. But I think you can see it doesn't really matter if we're talking about a group of 4 or 5 or more. We're going to have this difficulty. And I think thinking about the tension between the need of the one collective organization and the many different sets of preferences and values, I think there's mileage to be had there. So consider that. If it doesn't work for you, obviously, again, like the 3 I's, drop it. It's just something I found interesting that I wanted to offer. So there you go. Enjoy the rest of the course. I'll see you again soon. Thanks.